Sophia Loren is still alive in 2026, and she remembers everything Hollywood tried to bury. Before she was crowned the most beautiful woman in the world, she survived hunger and bombs in wartime Naples, then walked into a studio system that turned beauty into a cage with gold bars. She was dragged through a bigamy scandal, hunted by tabloids, and threatened with prison over her marriage to producer Carlo Ponti, headlines that tried to brand her a scarlet woman before she ever won an Oscar. She survived it. Most of her generation did not. The Golden Age sold its stars as goddesses while stealing their childhoods, their names, and their choices behind the scenes. Nearly all of those dazzling faces are gone now, and their darkest secrets went into the ground with them. But 15 women who lived through that glamour and that cruelty are still breathing in 2026. This is what they survived, and it starts with the woman the studios feared they could never fully control. Sophia Loren was born into war, raised on hunger, and pulled toward Hollywood by a mother chasing a dream that Sophia never asked for. Beauty became her ticket out of Naples, but in old Hollywood, beauty was currency the studios spent without asking permission. She won the Oscar for 2 women, the first ever given for a foreign language performance, while gossip columns obsessed over her marriage, her rivals, and her body. Then came yesterday, today, and tomorrow, where she peeled off her clothes for Marcello Mastroianni in a striptease so bold it scandalized censors across 2 continents and became one of the most talked about scenes in European cinema. Behind the gowns was iron discipline. She protected her family, guarded her name through a genuine bigamy scandal that nearly landed her in an Italian courtroom, and watched friends around her collapse under pills, pressure, and cruel headlines. In 2026, she remains the last living name on the American Film Institute's list of the greatest female stars, elegant, unbroken, and still the most talked about survivor of her era. Margaret O'Brien, America's favorite child star, wept real tears on command in Meet Me in Saint Louis, a performance so convincing that MGM printed her face on dolls, magazines, and lunchboxes practically overnight. She won a special miniature Oscar before she was even old enough to ride a bike alone, standing on a soundstage while other children her age were still learning to read. The studio owned every hour of her childhood, heavy lights, grown-up lines forced into a small mouth, the smell of grease paint mixing with cold coffee on the lot at dawn. When she grew older and her baby-faced charm faded, the same machine that built her simply lost interest overnight because child stars were treated as products, and products expire on schedule. She kept working anyway, refusing to disappear quietly. In 2026, she is still here, living proof that some lights refuse to go out just because the studio turned off the switch. Shirley MacLaine, she danced before she ever spoke a line, moving from Broadway chorus lines straight into Hollywood spotlight. In The Apartment, she played a woman used and discarded by powerful men, a role that cut painfully close to the real lives of countless actresses working under the same system. Then came Irma La Douche, where she played a good-hearted Parisian streetwalker with a mix of comedy and genuine vulgarity that pushed well past what nice leading ladies were supposed to attempt. The studio system wanted its women pretty, soft, and easy to steer, and Shirley MacLaine was none of those things. She asked hard questions in interviews, wrote unflinching books about reincarnation and spiritual truths, and spoke openly about ideas the industry found laughable. People whispered she never stopped talking anyway. Her Oscar for Terms of Endearment came decades later, a victory earned slowly rather than handed to her. And in 2026, she still stands, unscripted and unbroken. Kim Novak Columbia Pictures manufactured her from scratch, trading her real name, Marilyn Pauline Novak of Chicago, for a studio-built mystery woman with a soft voice and cool, unreadable eyes. In Picnic, she played a sultry small-town beauty whose lakeside dance around a water tower became one of the most sensuous images of 1950s Hollywood, dripping with longing the censors barely tolerated. Then came Vertigo, where Hitchcock twisted her into two women at once on a set she later described as cold, controlling, and suffocating. Fame, she said, felt like drowning in silk. When the studio kept pushing romance after romance over any real artistic control, she simply packed up and walked away. Oregon, paint, quiet land, animals, and open wind instead of sound stages. Hollywood called it a fall from grace. It was an escape. In 2026, the girl the studio invented finally belongs entirely to herself. Barry Chase, she moved like water long before anyone taught her a formal step, and Fred Astaire noticed instantly. An evening with Fred Astaire turned her into an overnight sensation, her body hugging costumes and sultry. Hip-driven choreography, considered daringly sensual for live television audiences of the era. The rehearsals never seemed to end. Her feet bled inside her shoes, while her smile stayed painted on for the cameras. She also built a respectable acting career in films like Cape Fear and It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, proving she was more than just a body in motion. The golden age chewed through dancers fast, breaking joints and ending careers by the time most women turned 30. Barry endured far longer, and when she finally stepped back, it was entirely on her own terms. In 2026, she remains a living piece of the last great dance-era television ever produced. Claire Bloom, Charlie Chaplin, personally selected her for limelight, pairing a young girl's aching stillness against an old clown's heartbreak in one of the most tender pairings of the decade. She went on to work alongside Olivier and Burton, standing shoulder to shoulder with the biggest names in British theater. Then came The Chapman Report, a genuinely controversial film built around a Kinsey-style study of suburban women's repressed desires. Bloom's character unravels in ways that drew real censorship battles on release. Hollywood taught her caution fast, showing her exactly how studios scripted women's entire lives down to the smallest detail: who to date, what to wear, when to stay silent for the cameras. She kept her spine straight regardless, writing candidly, speaking out publicly, and surviving bad marriages and worse headlines without disappearing. In 2026, she remains a picture of quiet, unshaken power. Barbara Eden. Long before the genie's bottle, Barbara ground through the 1950s studio machine of small roles, forced smiles, and endless humiliating screen tests, where a single wrong photograph could end an entire career overnight. I Dream of Jeannie made her immortal, but the harem costume she wore was so provocative that network censors famously forbade showing her navel on camera, turning a simple wardrobe choice into a national controversy. Even on a fun sitcom set, the rules never relaxed. Hemlines checked constantly, her body watched, her public image locked down tighter than any dramatic star's. She smiled warmly for the lens while quietly fighting for respect behind the scenes, because comedy that looked effortless never actually was. In 2026, Barbara Eden still greets fans with that same warmth. The woman trapped in the bottle finally, truly got free. Leslie Karen Jean Kelly discovered her dancing in a French ballet company and built her into an international star through an American in Paris and Gigi, dazzling audiences worldwide with musicals built on blistered feet and sleepless nights. Gigi itself carried a mildly scandalous premise wrapped in glamorous Parisian charm, a young girl deliberately groomed to become a wealthy man's courtesan. Dressed up as innocent romance. She was young, French, and essentially alone inside a foreign machine that polished her, controlled her schedule, and shaped her public narrative without asking her opinion. She fought for better, more substantial roles anyway, endured very public heartbreak, splashed across the tabloids, and kept working long after the movie musical genre quietly died around her. In 2026, Leslie Caron still carries that unmistakable Parisian grace, with real steel underneath the elegance. Rita Moreno, she arrived from Puerto Rico carrying a fierce heart and bigger dreams, only to have Hollywood hand her a string of spicy stereotypical roles before slamming most other doors firmly shut. Her explosive turn as Anita in West Side Story brought raw sensuality, pain, and pride to the screen, winning her the Oscar in a performance that broke stereotypes even while leaning directly into them. Then, disturbingly, years of near-total silence followed, good roles simply vanished, and the industry that cheered her one night seemed to forget her name the next morning. She has since spoken candidly about unspeakable moments in her career, describing men who wielded power like a weapon and rage she had to swallow just to keep working at all. She never broke under any of it. She went on to win the Emmy, the Tony, and the Grammy, joining the rare EGOT Club, and in 2026, Rita Moreno still burns exactly as bright as she ever did. Tippi Hedren's single glance during a commercial shoot turned her into a star through The Birds, a grueling production that used real, terrified birds and reportedly nearly destroyed her both physically and emotionally. Feathers stuck to her sweat, her heart hammered under the hot lights for days on end, and she has said the director's control extended far beyond anything written in the script. Then came Marnie, where she played a psychologically twisted, seductive thief hiding deep trauma, a role made even more unsettling by her real-life account of gifts, rules, and career threats that turned overnight stardom into a gilded prison. She eventually broke free entirely, building a genuine sanctuary for big cats in California and trading studio cameras for open roars instead. In 2026, she still lives among the wild animals she rescued. The blonde Hitchcock tried to own became completely untamable. Joanne Woodward She was built by pure craft rather than any studio makeup chair, winning her Oscar for the astonishing The Three Faces of Eve, in which one of her three fractured personas, the promiscuous, seductive Eve Black, delivered one of the most daring performances of the decade. She then fell into a decades-long marriage with Paul Newman that no tabloid scandal could ever seem to poison, a partnership built on shared art and shared generosity. Together they fought for serious, substantial roles and gave enormous fortunes away, even as the industry kept its knives sharpened nearby. Aging women were routinely pushed aside the instant their studio-approved glow began to change. Joanne directed her own projects, protected the theater she genuinely loved, and stayed fiercely private as fame turned uglier all around her. In 2026, Despite illness quietly stealing pieces of her memory, she lives on as a symbol of a marriage and a career the studio system never managed to fully script. Nancy Olson She starred in Sunset Boulevard, a film that tried to warn all of Hollywood about its own rot, and almost nobody in the industry actually listened. Playing the young, honest Betty Schaefer opposite fading stars and desperate, broken writers, Nancy watched the industry's darkest instincts up close while literally acting them out on camera, all while under a studio contract that measured her entire worth in cold screen tests. She saw faded stars, desperate writers, and soft voices hiding sharp fear behind every polite smile on set. She chose to step back from that world entirely on her own terms, prioritizing family, quiet, and personal dignity over further exposure to the machine. In 2026, she is the last living principal cast member of that masterpiece. The girl who warned us about Hollywood ultimately outlived it. Rosemary Harris, not every survivor of this era, chased tabloid covers or scandalous roles. Some simply chased the truth, night after night, on stage and screen alike. Rosemary Harris built her foundation on Shakespeare before moving into film, and decades later found new fame as the beloved Aunt May in Spider-Man, blending real warmth with unmistakable inner steel. In prestige dramas like Tom and Viv, about the turbulent marriage of T.S. Eliot, she showcased a dramatic range built on decades of serious stagecraft rather than any manufactured sex appeal. She worked through an era that told women to stay soft and silent, choosing instead difficult roles, long, grueling rehearsals, and genuine emotion over easy, empty glamour. The studio era loved dolls. Rosemary Harris was never, under any circumstances, a doll. In 2026, she remains a true master of the craft. Lee Grant, this is the story Hollywood actively tried to erase from its own history. Lee Grant was rising fast in her career until the blacklist hit without warning. One loyalty hearing, one flat refusal to destroy another person's career, and suddenly the phone simply stopped ringing. She was, in effect, punished for her integrity, enduring 12 brutal years of fear, whispers, and empty days with almost no major work coming her way. When she finally returned to the screen, she came back with real force, earning acclaim in the Heat of the Night and then an Oscar for the sexually charged Hollywood satire Shampoo, a film about a philandering hairdresser navigating a web of unsatisfied, restless women. She went on to direct her own hard-hitting projects, dragging uncomfortable truths into the light that the industry preferred to keep buried. In 2026, Lee Grant is still alive, still a witness to it all, and still dangerous to the lies that once tried to bury her. Eva Marie Saint, as the oldest living Academy Award winner, she stands as a genuine living bridge to a world that no longer exists anywhere else. She won an Oscar for her very first film, On the Waterfront, playing opposite Marlon Brando's trembling, raw honesty in one of cinema's most acclaimed performances. She then walked straight into Hitchcock's North by Northwest, playing Eve Kendall, a seductive double agent trading innuendo-laced dialogue with Cary Grant aboard a moving train, radiating cool, dangerous flirtation in a tight, unforgettable dress. Though she looked fragile and delicate on screen, she was anything but in real life, choosing family over Hollywood's endless demands for personal sacrifice and steering clear of the heavy nights and quiet tragedies that swallowed so many of her peers whole. In 2026, past 100 years old, she is still here, the last great glow of a burned-out age, having simply outlived the machine itself. Sophia Loren is still alive in 2026, and so are 14 other women who lived through Hollywood's most glittering and most brutal era. The studio system sold their faces to the world while quietly trying to own their souls, working many to exhaustion, silencing others with fear, and burying more than a few before their time. These 15 remain anyway, living proof, living memory, walking contradictions to every scandal, blacklist, and gilded prison the industry built around them. Hollywood clearly wanted much of this forgotten: the bigamy scandals, the blacklists, the birds, the broken contracts. We remembered it instead, starting with the most famous survivor of them all, and ending with the oldest. The Golden Age looked beautiful on screen. Off screen, it was a battlefield. And in 2026, a few extraordinarily brave women are still standing simply because they refused to stop living.